All right, guys, swim baits, swimming dogs. You got the new Mustang from Livingston. You got the big dogs. You got Poseidons. You got Magnuses. There's so many cool swim baits that have hit the musky market here in the last few years. And it's one of those times where the European guys beat us to the punch. Swim baits have been one of the biggest things to produce big northern pike in Europe for years. So your folks over at Savage Gear, they've made a lot of innovation. There's a lot of different things going on with swim baits. So you look at these guys, and everyone just goes, "It's a swim bait. What is it? What does it matter? It's a fish shape. It's a fish form. You know, which one do I pick?" Well, there's variance in between all the different swim baits because you're gonna have different actions. Some of them have a rolling action, right? Some have a very aggressive paddle. So let's kind of break down some of the major ones here, starting with the big ones. You've got your 10-inch Magnus. I believe this is the 10-inch swimming dog. The devil in the detail on paddle tails is the angle with that paddle. If you look here, the swimming dog has a laid back angle, right? That's from the bass world with the classic bait like the sassy shad you've seen for years. You probably fished them for walleye or bass as a kid. This gives us a much more subtle little action because the tail's already laid back when it's in the water. And so that tail is back here just flipping a little bit more subtle. You take, say, a Magnus, that's a straight down tail. So when that tail is hitting the water, it's straight down, which is a more aggressive thumping action, right? So if you're looking to pull up fish with a big action versus a more subtle action, that's what you need to look at. How those tails, how are they on that body? What's it going to do to the bait, right? And just the sheer size. This is the 10-inch tail. This is the 10-inch Magnus tail. And just the size of those two baits there of how this is a larger, thumpier tail. This is a more subtle tail. So I like to break out the swimming dog when I want to do something subtle. If fish are not wanting to move, they're not wanting to come in, they're highly pressured, I'll break out the swimming dog. If I'm looking to fish aggressive and really hit some stuff, try to pull them up, break out that aggressive Magnus. The same thing plays here. We'll grab, this is another swimming dog and the Mustang. So same deal with the angle and the size. So the Mustang has a larger tail, right? It's a thumpier, more aggressive presentation than the swimming dog, which again, it's that laid back tail, the different angles at which those tails are naturally going to ride in the water and how they're going to run. Because once the water hits this stuff and pulls it back, how much friction, how much force are we getting going there? So that's how you can look at your swim baits and go, well, which one do I buy? If we're looking for small and subtle, or are we looking for loud and in charge? That's going to be the difference. You've got, again, just didn't grab a Poseidon today. You've got even like the paddle tail that's there on the Kraken, which is the Kraken motto, where this whole bait is just twisting and rolling and, kind of banging through the water. And again, that's another large tail. That's a far larger tail. And the Poseidon, I think, comes in right about the same size. So it'll allow you to kind of get a feel for what we're looking for here. So do you want aggressive or do you want subtle? One thing I look at too with swim baits is just the plastic itself. How whippy is it going to be? Right? So we take it and we look at just, obviously the weight of the paddle will influence that, but how supple is that bait? And what that tells me is how slowly I can work it, right? So if I get a bait that's very stiff, it's telling me it wants to be worked fast. So the more supple that a bait is, the more finesse you can get out of it. So if you take, and again, my apologies for not having the Poseidon on board, but if you look at a Poseidon, it's a much stiffer plastic, which says it needs high speed to be worked the best that it can be, right? So you need to be more aggressive with that bait to get an action out of it. Again, with the more supple plastic, that's your slow rollers, that's your more finessey presentation. So that's how I'm looking at swim baits. That's how I'm trying to figure out what swim bait is the right swim bait. Let the muskies tell you what the situation is. If they're coming unglued and they're raging in and you can reel as fast as you want and they're going to hit it, Maybe it's time for the Poseidon. If they're being negative or neutral and they don't want to come in and you really got to go super subtle and super slow, that might be your swimming dog situation. You know, if you're seeing fish on blades or you're looking for big fish and trying to be really aggressive, that might be the time for that Magnus or the Mustang. So look at the baits, do some observation of how those tails flop. That'll kind of tell you what they're doing in the water. You know, the cool thing about swim baits is there's no wrong way to fish them. You hear that about everything. But swim baits are truly kind of a no-brainer, to be honest with you. Running a 130-pound Musky Shop fluorocarbon leader here. On the Magnus, it comes with a big split ring on the nose. I at times like to put split rings on the swimming dogs. What I'm looking at is how much roll do I want? Do I really want this bait to be really loosey-goosey? And that's when I'm slow rolling things, is when I'm really concerned with, do I have a split ring on there, or do I have a leader with a swivel? If it's a turn the handle and burn situation, I'm not worried about a split ring, because the sheer speed is creating the action. So, you know, as far as using these things, I mean, it's simple. Throw it out, turn the handle, right? There's a lot of different things you can do with them to get more out of these baits. So, you know, your basic retrieve, take her out there, punch her out, hits the water, we turn the handle, right? Just like a bucktail. And there's a lot of guys that fish swim baits just like this. You know, a lot of guys are burners, you know, just turning the handle here. But I like to mix things up because these are a fish-shaped form, right? You know, if you look at, say, like a bucktail doesn't look like anything. A bucktail looks like a lot of action in the water, right? The skirt's undulating, all this stuff. You need a little bit of speed to trigger strike with that. With swim baits, you can be more subtle, you can be more erratic. So mixing things in that really open up the retrieve. So most retrieves, we're over some shallow vegetation here, like a flat. I'll throw it out and I'll start just by reeling slow, right? And then add kicks. And so as I'm reeling along here, I'm thinking about what can I do to make that bait surge or go at an odd angle, right? Give him a little rip there if I want, and mix it up the entire time to make sure that bait's surging and then breaking off at weird angles. Again, more finessey, the more funky that we want to get with this. That split ring on the rip, you might catch some sideways with him. You might get that guy to open up, right? If you're working on this, and this is say a new thing where you're not comfortable with it, I'll take these guys and just surge. I'll get people to say, okay, let's reel, stop. Reel, stop. That is going to be enough of a mix-up that you're going to stand up from the pack, right? Because most anglers, when they're getting these swim baits out on the water, they do one thing, throw it and turn the handle. So just a basic little mix-up like that is going to put you head and shoulders above other anglers as far as actually contacting fish and getting strikes, right? So that's a simple way of doing it. Again, I prefer, more so than anything, is getting that bait out there and kind of reeling, give him one of those, right? Give it just a hair of slack where he's definitely erratic, he's definitely injured, right? That little pop there is often all it takes to get a strike. The amount of times I've done this and that turns into fish on is huge, because we don't want to bore them. The one thing that happens with swim baits so often is they get hypnotized. It's kind of like with your glide bait sometimes, guys. You can't just do this monotonous retrieve the entire time. You can't just sit there and go, okay, one of these days we eat it, and we're just reeling at the same speed, at the same rod angle, the whole bit. Mix it up, right? So again, that downward pop, one thing I like to do, especially because I really think about swim baits with weeds, right? That's really a core time that you want to be thinking about swim baits, and they're very usable year round. But over weed beds, in that kind of cover, you're going to pull some fish when you add in those pops and stutters, especially near pockets and holes in the weeds, right? So I don't have any in front of me right here, but if I have visible weeds, say I make that cast and I know I've got a void, I see a little void coming into this, right? Reel into that weed void, give it a stop, and then just give it a couple pops, right? Keep it in that void and wait for that muskie to come out of that edge, because when you have inside edges, if you will, right, you've got your weed bed, and a lot of times what we're doing is we're throwing to the outside edge of the weeds, right? we're thrown to this visual edge, or we can see in our electronics, then you'll have a void inside the weeds, which is another edge. Make sure to do surges, do stalls right there. That could be with any kind of bait, whether it be a dive and rise like a Titan or a Suic, but mainly with these swim baits, I want to make sure that I'm getting that going right there, okay? Let's just go ahead and grab here. You know, I'll grab another setup here where we get to our smaller swim baits, right? We've got the Mustang and the small swimming dogs everybody's acclimated with and comfortable with, right? With these guys, you know, I like to look at the swimming dog and the Mustang again as we've got a subtle presentation, we've got a ripping representation, right? So with the Mustang, I really like to use this guy in a manner where I'm doing the same thing in ripping, but more high speed, and then just that direct fall off. So the way that his head is put into this, right? The way this is, the weighting's down on this bait, he's gonna have a kind of a flutter fall. And so I like to surge reel that small bait quite a bit, right? Same thing with the swimming dog. I'm just not gonna surge it quite as fast because I'm trying to take advantage of the belly roll of these baits, right? And you got to realize it's not just the paddle, right? It's the belly roll as well. So that is a visual element. And so if I'm surging him, he's doing a lot in a small space, right? Just bang, bang, waiting for that strike every time. With the swimming dog, right, because of the angle of its tail, I'll do that in a much more subtle manner quite often, right? And I must add like minnow bait kind of twitches in on him on occasion. But it's super simple, but just make sure you're mixing these things up when it comes to your swim baits, guys. Now, where do we fish them? Again, weeds, you know, that's a top consideration for muskies in the summer, especially here in the Northwoods or Canada or anywhere in between. Weeds are always a consideration. But don't be afraid to use these with rocks. I've caught a lot of big fish off of rocky points with swim baits, but tailor your presentation to that. You know, say we have this big point here, we don't need to just burn it over it. Take advantage of some of this slower rolling stuff where you can actually get that bait down, right? Get the bait down and contour, say, that point, or contour the cover and structure that you're fishing over. This is going to allow us to just ensure that our bait is just running right where the muskies are. We're trying to get that as optimally close as we can with these fish. And the thing with swim baits, again, consider how good they are for slow speed applications. You don't have to work them fast the entire time. Get them dialed in, pick the right action. Again, it's that classic thing. It's the same as that Colorado versus Indiana blade, right? Or a willow leaf blade. All these different tails are going to put you in different places, and you need them all to catch muskies. Get dialed in, get on the water with these, and swim baits are definitely going to put more muskies in your net.